Greetings and good evening, and thank you for joining us for tonight's virtual meeting. We'll begin started in about 1 minute. All right. Greetings and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's virtual community advisory group meeting for the Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue and Marion Barry Avenue Southeast Area Safety and Connectivity Study. Um, We appreciate you joining us to share updates. We are excited to have you join us this evening. Before we begin the presentation, we do have a few housekeeping items to cover for the presentation. So this meeting will be open to the public and is being recorded. During this meeting, we ask that you save your questions and answers towards the end of the meeting, and our team will address them. There is a function for you to raise your hand as well as use the closed captions if needed. For the using Q&A for this meeting, if you have any questions, you can put those in the chat box and our team will address them at the end of the meeting. That's just a way for us to easily collect and record the questions and address them in a timely fashion. Using the three dot icon, you can use this to raise your hand or use any other smiley face icons if you agree with something, just to keep you engaged as well. If you're dialing in, you can also dial *3. The chat function is also can be used to share any comments or feedback that you would like to share during the meeting as well. And then so now I'll go ahead and pass this meeting off to Gabe so he can get the meeting started for the team. Gabe Onyeda.
Okay, thanks, Patrice. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening for our first community advisory group meeting since fall last year. The agenda for tonight include introduction of the project team and then the CAG members. We will recap the project, where we are, the project needs, purpose, activities since the fall 2023 event, status of the ideas presented in fall, so we can give you a status update where those are, whether they've been implemented or, or deferred. Then we'll also go through some of the projects that DDOT is doing within Ward 8A. We will go over recommendations, updated recommendations that we've come up with since the last time we met with you. Included are those what we call quick build or ASAP projects. So those are projects that can be done within about 6 months. Then we'll go over the Merembere Avenue Southeast concept plans and then the neighborhood traffic plans that we're also looking into. Following that will be the project and community engagement timelines so that you have an idea where we're going from here to the future. Next slide, please. So now we would like to go over the project team members, both the DDOT team and the consultant team. So within DDOT, my name is Gabe Onyeda, I'm the PM, and then Preston is the deputy PM. You can see Preston, I don't have a camera on my desktop here. Then within the consultant team, we have the Kelesons, Alec, with the Kellesons and Associates. You've seen him many times. We've been with you for some time. And then, of course, Patrick Brooks, Stacey Hamby. They are with the TBA. They are in charge of our outreach activities. Next slide, please. So at this point, I would like to have the community advisory members attending to introduce themselves and then their interest and what they look forward to see with the project. So can you please, Patrice, can you please introduce yourselves and tell us your interest and
Okay.
what you'd like to see?
Thanks, Gabe. So I'll just call your name and then Danica will unmute you and you can share a brief, your name and your role on the CAG. So Adele Roby.
Is she on mute?
She is.
Adele?
Okay.
Let's go to the next person. Come
Um,
back to her.
we also have Commissioner Jamila White is on, and she's also been a member of the CAG.
Glad we are resuming these calls. Also, are you all going to be able to speak to 14th Street safety updates during this meeting?
Well, 10th Street.
14th Street, it's part of the overall network. We'll get through the presentation, and then towards the end, I guess if it's not covered, we'll write down a question or if there's anything specific.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner White, for joining us this evening. We also have from the MOKers, the Mayor's Office of Community Relations, we have Mr. Julius Terry.
Julius Terry. I'm the Ward 8 liaison with the Mayor's Office of Community Relations and Services. And my support, I would just like to be a part of making our streets safer, not only for traffic, but for all things surrounding.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And then from Councilmember Trayon White's office, we have Mr. Kevin Coleman and Ms. Monique Jupe. Okay, thank you for joining us tonight. And moving on, we also have a resident representation, Mr. Paul Davis. Okay, thank you so much for joining us.
Great, thanks. Try to put myself on camera, but I feel like I'm in a spaceship. I can't quite find the right button. So nice to be here. I'm a frequent user of the intersection. Bus it, drive it, walk it, bike it. I push a stroller it, and I'm happy to be here. I hope that the next 820 days of this project will not be like the last 820 days. That will move from problem admiration to problem solving. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Paul. I appreciate that. And then we also have a comment in the chat from Councilmember Trayon White's office. She said she can't unmute. They have a new team member that has joined. His name is Edward Ford. Thank you, Edward. Do you want to introduce us to you? I'm sure we'll be seeing you a lot around Ward 8, and welcome. Okay. Then we also have Reverend Wanda Thompson to represent the faith-based community for Ward 8. She is on the call and is unable to unmute.
No, I'm here. Can you hear me? Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I'm pastor of the Ambassador Baptist Church right there, just about at the corner of Minnesota Avenue and Marionberry Avenue. And I'm here representing the interests of my church in terms of what the traffic is going to be like coming around the corner, the bus lanes and all. We want to make sure that the residents here have a way to park and the church has a way to park, in addition to the safety for the rest of the community. So I'm here representing our interests. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. We do have a couple other members that are folks that have joined the team, joined the call, and I'll call your name out. They're not members of the CAG, but as you know, this meeting is open to the public. So we also have Jared Powell that I see have joined, and a Jamie H. All right, thanks. Handing it back over to you, Gabe.
Okay, thanks, Patrice. With that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Preston, to now go over the project need and purpose activities that we've done since fall. We met with you, and then status of some of the ideas that we talked about during the fall event, and then the projects within the 8A boundaries that DDOT is working on. So, Preston.
Great, thanks, Gabe. Again, good evening, folks. My name is Preston Judy. I'm the Deputy Project Manager for this study. So briefly want to touch base and call back to the initial project need and purpose of this project. So you've all seen pieces of this and various slides and presentations along the way, but we thought it would be important to remind ourselves of why we're here in the first place. So this intersection, as you all know, is the gateway to Anacostia. It's hard to get there without going through it in some capacity to get to the different resources in the community. And we've got our two major corridors of MLK Avenue and Marion Barry Avenue. And as some of you have already noted, and I would say all of us on the call have experienced in person ourselves, it doesn't feel safe to walk, cross the street, bike through the intersection, and I wouldn't call it the least stressful intersection to drive through either. So overall, there, as we've heard over the many weeks and months on this project, there's improvements that can be made, and we are looking forward to getting to some action here. So again, working with the community, working on the existing multimodal access and safety, and getting to some more medium scale and more immediately implementable solutions. Next slide, please. So a recap of what's been going on since the fall. So the last meeting I believe we had was back in September of 2023. We've been paused on the project front, but not paused in our efforts on the project. So while we were extending our contract, we were coordinating with the bus priority projects that and some corridor safety projects also that you folks may have also been involved and been to some of those meetings, and making sure that this project is integrated and coordinated with all the investment that's going on in ANC 8A. And then I want to call specifically to February of 2024, and part of this shift, if you will, toward a little bit some of these specific solutions and bulleted points you'll see here of the focus. We had a meeting back in February, not specific to this project, but to discuss with the ANC all of the different work in ANC 8A, and really what we heard in that meeting, and I want to thank the commissioners we have on the call, is the need for a more integrated approach to our projects. That while there's a lot of investment, there's a lot of work to be done and needs to address, and that's great, that we want to make sure we understand what those look like together on a neighborhood level. And with where this project has been already looking in the immediate area of this intersection, it was already sort of there, and we want to take it that next step and provide some tools that we'll walk through later to do that even better and pull in some of these more immediately implementable solutions. So restarting this project as we have getting into summer here, with a focus on, again, some of what we've called ASAP improvements at some select locations that we're targeting installation by the end of this year if possible. It is dependent on our construction queue and how busy we are in terms of how we'll implement it. We want to integrate more planters into our no parking areas and any of our recommendations. We've heard loud and clear from folks on this project and elsewhere that while all of us are on the same page about needing safety at our intersections, when and where possible, we'd like to also make our spaces not just safe, but beautiful. And so we want to do our best to integrate planters and work with the community to make these safe but attractive spaces. We're working on a more integrated approach to transportation plan for the neighborhood of Anacostia and Fairlawn together, so we can see these various recommendations and concepts from pieces of other projects, from what we've heard from you on this project and see it together and understand how it will function together. And then again, from the overlap of projects, which you'll see on the next page, there's a lot of pieces of projects that have touched Marionberry Avenue and various segments, from corridor safety studies to what we've discussed on this project. But what we want to also walk away with this study is a unified transportation concept for Marionberry Avenue. So as we continue to invest in the future and get towards maybe a larger infrastructure project, we want to be on the same page as a community of what should that look like? What do we want Marionberry Avenue to look like? And since pieces of different projects have touched that, we want to put it together and have a plan that we can pass on, that the community has seen, has vetted, and would like to see for the future of Marionberry Avenue. Next slide, please. Looks like we may have had a little overlap here, but we just wanted to emphasize the different investment that we have going on here. We'll go ahead and skip to the next slide since I referred to it. And I'm going to pass it on to one of our consultants, Alec. He's going to walk us through the status of some different ideas that were presented back in the fall and walk us through what's been done, where things stand, and then we'll keep moving towards some of this more renewed focus that I talked about.
Yeah, and sorry about the previous slide. It looks like a picture got changed there. We'll make sure to update that before sending it out on the map. I do want to talk about the HSIP improvements one, talking about the ideas that we presented back in the fall, but also talk about the HSIP improvements. We'll do that first on the right side. And you can see, and I think you've all seen it, at the intersection, the dual right turn lane that was there previously has been removed. So it is now a right turn only lane, and it is striped and enforced, and that you're only allowed to turn now from the right turn lane there. And also, we striped out the no parking area in the northwest and southeast quadrants of the intersection. And then the crosswalks have been restriped, and they were hard to see back in the May of 2023. But they have been restriped, so they are now all high-vis crosswalks. And I'm seeing a comment, I guess, to confirm, can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so in addition to the ASAP improvements there from the HSIP at the intersection itself, we also called for permanent changes at the intersection, and those have been rolled into the Marionberry Avenue unified concept design that we'll talk about in a little bit later. And then, Paul, in particular, you had quite a bit of feedback about the connection from 11th to 13th Street that we were proposing. That has been removed from consideration, both in response to your feedback, community feedback, and then, frankly, just poor cost effectiveness, and we weren't getting a lot of benefit out of that. And the cost kept escalating due to other bridges and connections that would be needed for that one. So that connection is gone from any future study. Okay. And then we also talked about ideas on 11th Street and really fixing the 11th Street connection to the intersection itself. And so we talked about automated traffic enforcement cameras on the approach from the 11th Street down south towards the intersection itself. And those have been approved at this point, but are in the queue. There's a long backlog of camera locations in the district. So those are in the queue for a future installation. We also talked about reallocating space and narrowing the ramps on the 11th Street Bridge and narrowing that configuration, particularly that crosswalk from the northbound off ramp. And those have been moved to the 11th Street to M Street, Marionberry Avenue Southeast bus priority project. And the question about the automated traffic enforcement cameras would be speeds in particular approaching the intersection from the 11th Street section there. And again, the picture in the bottom right has also been adjusted. Hopefully it's not a recurring issue in this. And then Preston, do you want to talk about the 1234 Marionberry Avenue development?
Yeah, so as part of this project, recommendations that were discussed as part of this project is creating a uniform cross-section north of Marionberry Avenue along the future development and facilitating a path through the site. This will be included as part of that project as it goes through public space permitting. So I will actually be heavily involved in the public space permitting process myself, and will be a reviewer and be able to communicate these expectations. So as that project is going through the permitting process and looking at how we expect them to upgrade the streetscape and our public space and public realm, we'll be working with that development directly to facilitate these types of recommendations as they get through further in design with it moving forward. And Alec, I'm going to pass back to you. We can't hear you right now, Alec, if you're...
Sorry, I muted myself. We also had the visionary ideas that we talked about the Fall Fun Day, and I think they were kind of buried when we talked about them in the previous fall. But they were ideas to have connections over I-295 and the railroad tracks there, along with just planters and benches on the 11th Street Bridge itself, and that's probably a smaller idea. So that's recommended as an Anacostia bid-led initiative. So that one can move forward, working with the Anacostia bid leading that effort. And then for the other connections, there are several other projects forthcoming where those projects can be rolled into consideration within those projects. So both the I-295 project and or the current existing Anacostia Waterfront Initiative project. So those can be considered at a later date. Yeah. All right, and then, yeah, and then continuing on, we do have coming out of the fall and then working with DDOT earlier this spring, we took the recommendations that we had talked about previously and consolidated them into these 6 recommendations. And we'll start on the top left. So the top left was to improve the safety by removing those dual right turn lanes and add the TCOs, the traffic control officers, to the intersection themselves. And those are complete, so check that off, and that's exciting. New was install the automated speed enforcement cameras on 11th Street approaching the MLK intersection from the north. And so those cameras have been approved, and DDOT is currently coordinating, as we mentioned, with the ATE enforcement team to implement them. There is a backlog right now, but those are in process. Next is creating design plans for the intersection of 13th and W Street and along Marionberry Avenue between MLK and Minnesota Avenue. And those are slated for implementation in late 2024 or next year. And Preston will talk more about those in a minute. Also, Preston mentioned the concept design for Marionberry Avenue from Anacostia River to Alabama Avenue, including the underpass. We talked about the 1234 Marionberry Avenue development. And then at the very end, Preston will talk about the concept and design plans for the Fairlawn and Anacostia neighborhoods. Preston, did you have things to add here?
One flag that I did want to have related to the traffic control officers note here. We've been really happy and really grateful that we've been able to have TCOs placed there over the summer. With school starting soon, we will have to reevaluate what's possible with deployment, right? School safety is really the focus in terms of where we're able to deploy folks. So it is something that is on our radar. We're having discussions about how we can best continue safety improvements here. But with school starting soon, I just want to flag that is something that in terms of the deployment ability that we have with a number of staff with school, there could be some changes in the immediate term once school starts here in the next 3-4 weeks. So next slide, I'll get into a recap of these, quote unquote ASAP improvements, the ones we want to move through and move forward with faster. That if you'll call back to folks that were at the ANC meeting in June, I gave a brief project update and walked through sort of the high level thoughts we had here and how we want to move forward quicker. quickly. And so I want to give you an update of where we stand on these 4 items specifically. So 13th and W Street, this is something that we have heard loud and clear on this project, on just about any project that touches this area. I've heard this from lots of folks that we need a stop sign on that leg. So you can see to the right, this is actually a draft plan that we're working on. It's in design and in review internally so that we can make sure it meets our standards, where we will add a stop sign for W Street eastbound. So that's on the approach from MLK towards 13th Street. In order to do that safely, we'll have to remove that dual left turn. And so you can actually see up there, which dovetails into a later one, we're working to incorporate planters to reinforce those no parking areas. Again, we want to make these beautiful and safe at the same time. And so we're making every effort to accommodate that within these plans. As we work through some changes to make sure they meet our standards, this will go to an NOI. So that will be a next step once we get the plan. So that will be coming next and finishing up the planning process in relation to this. And then once we get the NOI through, we'll be able to hopefully get it in the queue to get towards implementation. Fingers crossed for this year. I'm really trying. If not this year, it would be early next year. I do just want to call out on those plans. You can see, you can't see my mouth, but the northwest corner where it's hatched out, you have the angled stripes and there's those dots. Those represent planters. So where in some areas you would see flex posts potentially to reinforce where we don't want people to park because we want to keep it clear and visible so folks can see pedestrians and turning vehicles. We're making every effort to integrate planters there. And that's one thing we can get some feedback on later. We will be looking to partner with either the BID or the ANC or a civic association in terms of maintenance and planting in that. So make sure that we can keep those beautiful and keep those maintained. So we are looking for partners on that within the community. I'll discuss Marionberry Avenue on the next slide, but again, I just touched on planters, how we want to integrate that into the plans that we generate out of this, and we'll get towards implementation. We're also coordinating directly with the BID. I've spoken with Christina quite a few times about planters of where we can make that happen in other areas where we already have no parking, areas of no parking, to look for opportunities to have planters there that the BID could initiate and make sure that we can get that through our permitting process as well. Again, to reinforce where we need to keep it clear for safety reasons, but also keep it beautiful. And then with the Marionberry underpass, as we all know, there's a pervasive illegal parking and dumping problem through the underpass. When we came to the community back in June, we had pitched the idea of Jersey barriers potentially along the side to make it impossible to park there. We've had some challenges along the way that we're working on trying to get the problem addressed. And one hiccup that we've discovered recently is as far as we're aware, and we've been coordinating with National Park Service, NPS, NPS actually owns the street and the sidewalk. And so that's a hiccup that we weren't aware of back in June. And when I say Jersey barriers, that's the hardened concrete, like 6-foot by 2-foot barriers you might see along streeteries or seen to like reinforce like along a road that you might see, or like on a highway, for instance, those movable barriers. That's what I mean when I say Jersey barrier. So we looked at that as an option to keep that clear, but with it not being our property, with it being NPS property, we can't put them on a place that's ours. So that was the potentially faster process. So I'm coordinating directly with NPS and working with them to see what kind of enforcement support we can get. And so that's something that's actively going on. Again, we just recently confirmed the jurisdiction that it being under NPS today, actually. So we're actively coordinating with NPS to, if it's not Jersey barriers, to find a way to address this problem fast. Next slide, please. So getting a little bit into this dovetails into the unified concept with Marionberry Avenue. But as part of this study already, we started to develop some recommendations from the waterfront, so Anacostia Road to Minnesota Avenue, and included with that is to restore full-time parking on Marionberry Avenue between 13th Street and Minnesota Avenue. So as it currently stands, there's kind of mismatching blocks. There's that first block between MLK and 13 along the Art Center and Kitchen Savages where there's parking on the south side, and then there's 2 lanes going towards MLK and 11th Street to turn onto the bridge. And then that next block is inconsistent. And then further past Minnesota Avenue, you can see that second bullet is It's small, but it's referring to another plan. We have a corridor safety study that another group at DDOT has been working on that's slated to be implemented next year, where they're looking at making safety improvements east of Minnesota Avenue. So it leaves this one block where we want to make it a consistent driving experience and have really make it function closer to how it already is, where folks do sometimes pull over on the right close to like the barbecue joint, and make it clearer for the travel lanes going west and make that a more consistent experience. So that's in design currently. That we had flagged that back in June, that's something that we've discussed and have received a lot of support when we brought it up at the ANC. Again, working through design, and it will go to NOI, so you'll be able to see exactly what that looks like in design. But as part of this, again, there's these different pieces that have touched Marionberry Avenue and will continue to, because we're it's a big focus. We want to be able to walk away with a clear, unified concept of what that should look like for the entire corridor, since we have those pieces. And that will be part of this engagement process as we get to the public meetings to get feedback from the general community as well, is what should that look like? You know, between the curbs, we have these safety improvements that are coming east of Minnesota next year, but those are more of that medium scale, which is the implement it quickly. So it's a lot of pavement marking changes, it's some curb extensions in select locations, but it's not necessarily that really long-term infrastructure project that's looking at maybe nice landscaped medians, or are there spots where we want to bump the curbs out? So in anticipation of a project like that in the future, we want to set the tone of what we want that to look like by putting these together and having that unified concept that we will then pass on and say, this is the vision for Marionberry Avenue. And when we have a bigger project, we'll be able to start design with that in mind. So next slide, please. Now, getting into the more the integrated transportation plan that I alluded to. And again, this is born out of the overlap of the many projects. There's a lot of investment here, and something we heard loud and clear, especially from the ANC, is we need an integrated approach. We need to be able to see what's going on. You know, when we talk about stuff on Marionberry Avenue, it could impact a block or two in, and we want to be able to see what these potential changes are. So moving in towards the public meeting, which I'll get to when we're hoping to have that, we're working with a program that will allow us to have this built out. This is actually, I believe, a snapshot of Remix, right, Alec? Where we will be able to comb around in a map and zoom in and zoom out and see what these changes are, see the comments and see it in a neighborhood context, not just along a specific corridor or one street, and be able to look at those and evaluate those changes together. But with that, we wanted to focus on what are before we talk about options, before we talk about specific recommendations, what are the considerations, what are the challenges that we're facing, regardless of the path we choose to move forward with as a community. So with that in historic Anacostia, and some of this is, again, it's coming from the bus priority project that initially was included, that included some proposed changes south of Anacostia. It comes with some traffic safety inputs where we've heard safety improvements that we've heard from the community that we need to implement and incorporate. We want to put it together and focus on those challenges and then talk about the solution. So as it stands with WMATA's Better Bus Initiative, so they've been doing public engagement and they closed that period earlier last month, mid-month. At this point, as we understand it, WMATA by the end of next year is planning for bus service along V&W Street. So WMATA does not choose what the layout of the roads are. That's DDOT. We choose what goes on between the curbs, if you will, in terms of lanes and parking and so on. But WMATA does the route planning. So as it currently stands, we have to be prepared to accommodate bus service along W and V Street, regardless of what the street specifically looks like. Emergency services. We have heard loud and clear from the fire station at 14th and V. They're having challenges. They are getting slowed down, getting out of the neighborhood to respond to emergencies. So the existing layout is not working for Engine 15 as we understand it. Again, there's some broader traffic safety issues that we've heard from TSIs, traffic safety inputs, and the community broadly. And the two big things that we've heard time and time again is we need to understand at a neighborhood level, what's the access and circulation going to look like, and when at all possible, preserving parking. So these are kind of our 5 main approaches. We're going to get into what that looks like for Fairlawn and some options within historic Anacostia to accommodate those expected changes. and there's going to be some trade-offs. And again, this is our first pass at what we think it could be, and then we want to get the feedback. We want to hear your thoughts, and then we want to be ready to go to the community and explain what those trade-offs and challenges are going to be able to address these various items. So I'm going to pass it on first back to Alec, and he's going to walk through the Fairlawn part of this, what's been discussed previously, and then I'll get into some of the options that we're looking at for historic Anacostia within this broader plan.
So we'll start with Fairlawn, and you'll see here in the next slide, we'll show you existing Fairlawn, and then some of the proposals for Fairlawn, which frankly, these are all exactly the same as what you saw previously in that fall meeting. So one was convert T Street to one-way eastbound full-time. So T Street would be eastbound all the way from 13th Street to Minnesota Avenue. Teeing up the T Street and S Street intersections with Minnesota Avenue Southeast. Right now, really helping kind of correct that angle there so that they're more perpendicular, help slow speeds in particular there. A uniform 13th Street cross-section north of Marionberry Avenue. And then curb extensions and speed humps throughout the neighborhood. So this is what Fairlawn looks like today. We have arrows showing existing one-way operations and then current two-way operations. And you can see T Street is really, it's one way between 13th Street and 14th Street, and then it's one way part-time in the morning due to commuter traffic between 13th and Minnesota Avenue. 13th Street formerly was one way and has been since converted to two-way south of S Street in the area. So this would convert, let's go here. The proposal would be to convert T Street to one way all the way between 13th Street and Minnesota Avenue. And then we're showing these green blobs for now, really to show you that the curb extensions are to be reconsidered at every intersection. I think we had previously shown some proposals for curb extensions, but really there'd be curb extensions or neighborhood gateways throughout the Fairlawn area, really to help slow turning vehicles and slow through movements there. And then also teeing up at S Street and T Street where they meet Minnesota Avenue. And then with that, I'll turn it back over to Preston to talk about the Anacostia options.
Okay, and I'm going to walk us through again, thinking back to what are those considerations that we need to account for. Again, they are sometimes competing interests. They are sometimes going to be trade-offs between them, but that they're challenges that we're facing regardless. And again, we see this as an all of the above approach. So I want to be very clear. Addressing the concerns and the challenges that come with emergency response times does not mean that we're not implementing safety and traffic calming approaches. There are different options that we have, and that's what we want to discuss. Again, these are two ideas that we think take a good approach to address those concerns in different ways with different trade-offs. But it's not in exchange for the other. So, and one thing I do want to call out here that's in both options. One thing that we're working with our Traffic Safety Administration and folks there, and there's already been some discussions, is still having having the traffic calming. We're looking at the possibility of piloting what we would call speed cushions. And so I know that speed humps are something we see that are prevalent. One thing that we'll get into and also discuss in more detail when we're at the public meeting of what that could look like is looking at an area where can we test out areas that have the vertical deflection, right? So places that you've got to drive up and over, but as a slightly different design, a different device to slow down that allows emergency vehicles to also address their concerns. So again, I just want to be clear, it's not an either or here, it's an all above for us, and it's a trade-off in the approach that we take. So I'm going to get into the two different options. I'm going to summarize them briefly. For option one, I would describe it as the minimize circulation and access changes. So largely keep it the same, but the trade-off is we'll have to look at different options in terms of keeping things clear. And two is sort of the opposite approach, which is maximize parking and maximize what we can do with space and have room to have curb extensions, have different treatments potentially. But to do so, we have to look at circulation changes. So I'm going to get into some of these details. This next slide, you can see what it looks like currently. So the darker red arrows Again, we're going to have great street labels when you're able to zoom in and out in the future, and we'll make it very clear on the boards for the public meetings. The darker arrows here are where there's one-way streets, and that's the current direction they go. The lighter red are the current two-way streets. Next slide, please. This is the lower circulation change, if you will, concept that I referred to. So again, thinking about how do we address the concerns from our stakeholders at the fire station, while also addressing safety and addressing the need where we know, again, we've heard the message that some folks have concerns about potential one-way changes in circulation. So what this does is focus in on what we think. Again, it's a first pass. We're going to continue to engage with both you and the community. This was what we think addresses the primary concern of the fire department. So there will still be speed humps where they exist elsewhere in the community. Hey, Patrice, is there a technical flag or anything with the?
No, that was accident. Continue, sorry.
Okay, so make sure you could hear me. So with this, we focused on what's the primary issue. So what we've heard is there's challenges getting out from the firehouse to respond to MLK. So what this focuses on is minimizing the changes that we see in the community, but on those two blocks especially, removing parking to keep things clear. And it's a trade-off, and we recognize that. But to maintain clear and safe two-way operations from the fire department, which you can just see there, just to the right of that no parking symbol on the right, that's the fire station. This emphasizes those two blocks to get out to V Street and keeping them clear. So making sure we have space for two travel lanes, and one lane of parking would remain. Those blue the blue symbols you'll see to the southwest portion, those are proposed one-way changes that are across both scenarios. Those are stemming from, back to the slide that had overlapping slides, there was what some folks have called like a historic Anacostia project. It was a compiled set of traffic safety requests. And as part of that, these are the sort of the minimum one-way changes that we think are really crucial to implement some safety changes. So where the two streets V together over there at MLK by the Starbucks, there's some serious sight distance issues, some visibility issues for turning vehicles. These are what we see after coordinating with our traffic safety folks as the minimal changes to address those safety issues, address the concerns from the fire department, but largely maintain what as it stands now. One hang up here, I will say, again, we're anticipating bus service on V and W Street. And I want to be clear, WMATA does the bus planning and decides where the bus routes are going. And we can dive into that a little bit more in detail later on the call and also at the public meetings, but we are anticipating that coming. So WMATA has been doing their Better Bus initiative, which includes some routing changes, which includes efficiency improvements that they've been coordinating with the community. And at this point, our expectation is that they will be sending buses down V and W Street. And so we want to make sure we can accommodate the best. So yes, V Street is tight, W Street is tight, and there are buses that go there currently. With that expectation, we want to try to address them that we can. So this sort of maintains the existing challenges that might exist on W Street with the buses that are already there, tries to address the emergency responses, especially on those two blocks near the fire department. There will still be some challenges with tight streets and buses in this condition, but it focuses on minimal circulation changes. And then the next option, we take the opposite approach. Again, with the trade-offs of the initial ones that I laid out, this one, we took the approach of what could we do to maximize and preserve on-street parking and minimize those changes while also accommodating the concerns we've heard from the fire department and understanding that buses that will be coming down W and V Street. And so what this would do, again, you've seen this in some capacity in one of the concepts in the bus priority project. What this concept would look at is reconfiguring the space between the curbs. We wouldn't move the curbs from where there are, reconfiguring how we use that space. And by making V Street from 16th Street to MLK be westbound, so going from 16th Street toward MLK, we would have space to have a lane of traffic to keep it clear for fire trucks. We would have space for the buses to get through and to maintain parking on both sides. And depending on each specific block, it's potentially room too to consider different traffic calming treatments in terms of like how we squeeze in and where it intersections. Because we're facilitating traffic in one direction, it gives us options there to try to accommodate more within that space. And then it does the opposite for W Street. So again, same concept, preserving all of the parking on both sides on every block, but traffic would go from MLK towards 16th Street eastbound on W Street. And as part of this concept, there would be a signal at V Street and MLK. Again, with those same one-way changes for safety reasons in the southwest portion of the study area. So again, with this one and with both of these, the second one, there will need to be traffic analysis that comes with it. One other change you'll see at the top, and the reason we put this in. So one other change would also be changing the direction of U Street between MLK and 14th Street. So between 14th Street and MLK, currently it's one-way westbound from 14th Street toward MLK. One of the challenges with the earlier concept, when the bus priority project had included this section, it no longer does, but when they were looking at how to best accommodate this, we were seeing some queuing challenges, some congestion in the southbound direction from the MLK Marionberry intersection toward W Street. And part of that was with vehicles making lefts onto W Street. We were seeing some congestion issues. And so our idea is, well, if we change the direction of U Street, keep it one way, it already is one way, but change the direction, could that address that concern and accommodate those options, maximize the on-street parking on both sides, and accommodate those expected challenges with bus service going to V&W and the existing ones with the fire department. So we're just past 7:20. We want to start addressing some of the specific questions and comments. One thing at the top, if you can go to the next slide, and I know I threw a lot at you, so we're ready to start going through those questions and really make sure we get specific feedback for you. What we're proposing is a public meeting on Saturday, September 7th. So again, we've done this on similar projects in similar areas. We want to make sure that the most folks can get there, where we would give people the opportunity to not see the concepts just as you've seen it at that high level with conceptually what we're doing, but walk you through the specific, it's called Remix, the tool that we're going to use, where you can zoom in and out, see what it looks like on your block. Maybe there's a block that you care about that's really focused on because it's near where you live. See it all in that full context of the neighborhood, and then we'll be able to link that to onto the project website and give you the ability to engage with that on your own. So we want to give folks an all of the above approach to give us that feedback, work with it, learn from us in that public meeting how to engage with it, and then also have our printouts as well as that we've done at other meetings and give you the opportunity to throw a post-it note down, let us know how you think. And we're looking at potentially like live polling when we're at those public meetings, where we could have a screen up where we can ask the questions about, what's the important trade-off for you? Is it maintaining parking, but you're okay with one-way changes if that's the trade-off for maximizing parking? Or what are the areas where you would be okay to try out the speed cushions, where again, we want to have that balance of traffic calming while addressing the fire station's concerns? We can have those specific options and know where we have those trade-offs, what's the preference of the community, and where are we willing to make those trade-offs to adjust those challenges, because we're not going to be able to avoid the trade-offs between these challenges, and we recognize that, and we want to know what the community sees as the best path forward. So before we open up and start to get through quick things, just a quick run through of the next slides, just to address the question I saw come in through the chat. So quick overview of the timeline, and actually if you flip two or three slides forward to the community engagement timeline. So we have this CAG meeting currently, and then we're going to follow that up with the public workshop that I just alluded to. Then we'd have time in between, again, to engage with the tool that we're talking about, where you can zoom in and out and do it on your own time, provide the comments. We'd come back to this same group. Again, we want you're our sounding board. We want to get this feedback so we can prepare and make adjustments as we're able to prep for that meeting. So we'd come back to you all, and then we'd come back and have a virtual public meeting where folks have had the chance to engage with the tool. They've had an opportunity to give us the feedback directly in person, and then we'll come back and have a virtual public meeting where we'll walk through how we incorporated that and how we've made those changes. And again, along the way, I want to emphasize, if we need to come to an A and C meeting and give an update, that's the underline, like, we can do that. So that's not limiting that engagement, where we can come and give a quick project update like I did in June. that's kind of understood on our part that we can be available for that, but specific to this project, this is what we're looking at for this project. So again, that's a lot of talking from me. I want to make sure we have time before 8 to answer some specific questions. So I'm going to pass it back to Patrice and her team so she can help facilitate the question and answer.
Yes, thank you so much, Preston. And we do have a couple questions and comments in the chat. So I'll just go ahead and read through them. And if the team is able to answer them, that would be great. And I guess during that time, if there's any other feedback that you want to add with your question, you can raise your hand and Danica will unmute you. So we do have a couple questions starting earlier in the chat. Julia, are there any plans to slow traffic coming into or leaving Anacostia on the 11th Street Bridge? And I'll say that again. It says, are there any plans to slow traffic coming into or leaving Anacostia on the 11th Street Bridge? A couple other feedback to say 100,000% to Julia's comment. Other folks chiming in. Preston?
And we've been out there and seen it in person. Totally agree. There's definitely a speeding issue there. So back to the earlier slides, we do have we're working with our ATE groups, our automatic traffic enforcement group. We do have a speed camera installation approved. We're working on the details of exactly where that will be, but our current resources are maxed out. Essentially, as I understand it, everywhere we have equipment to do these sorts of efforts, to have speed cameras, they're implemented. And so it's in the queue to get implemented somewhere either along the 11th Street Bridge on that portion that would help address that speeding issue so that folks are going slower as they come in around that curve. We're hoping that will help address that specifically. And again, from what I've seen where we've done in other parts of the city, it really works. And we do see from when it gets implemented, those violations that would come down after that. So that's one way that we'd be able to address that we're working on.
Awesome. Thank you, Preston. And then also from Commissioner White, can you please clarify which no parking areas, where there'll be no parking areas?
I think so. I think that might have specifically come up when we were talking at 13th and W, if I recall. So if you bring up that slide, let me see which one that had the draft one. That might be the best one to talk about no parking areas broadly. So here specifically, closest to the intersection, you can see where there's the diagonal lines. And so broadly speaking, according for our guidelines, there's not allowed to be legal parking within 25 feet of a crosswalk. So when we come in and make these changes, that's step one, where with our design and engineering manual, we have to keep those areas clear. It's a minimum 25 feet from a crosswalk. There's some minor changes depending on the direction of traffic, but that's kind of the best way I can say to capture that. We have to keep those corners of the intersection clear to make sure that cars can see pedestrians, that pedestrians can see cars. And so that's where you see the diagonal hatching. That's where the no parking areas are. And that's where we're looking at placing planters to help keep it clear. We all experience sometimes the hatching, folks park there anyways and don't always follow that. And so we want to reinforce that and make it difficult to do so to keep it clear. Exactly. Thank you.
And then we have another question from Commissioner White. Have you engaged the churches on the block?
So I guess, Alec, I'll speak to that in terms of and you as well, Patrice, about the broader horizon of this project and how the engagement's been. I guess I want to make sure, is that about 13th and W specific or broadly? Because I believe there's in some of, I don't know if we have the recap of all the different groups that we've engaged here. I believe the answer is yes, broadly, we absolutely have engaged as part of this project, and I'll defer to you, Patrice, and you, Alec, in terms of specifics there.
I know we did attend a faith-based, I guess, I'm sorry, I can't recall the name of the meeting. It's escaping me, but the monthly faith-based meeting that you guys have for brunch or on Saturdays, we did attend one of those with Reverend Thompson earlier last year.
Oh, and I see, okay, and I see Commissioner White, I see 13th and W, I think is what you were referencing. So, okay. I mean, we did present that specific concept at the ANC meeting. It will go to an NOI, so there will be that typical response period where we'll be able to work through it then. And we're happy to talk with folks. If there's anybody specific in mind, do let us know. I'm always happy to give folks a call and chat about these things if there's specific concerns. So if there's anyone specific there, please do let me know.
Thank you. Going on to Paul Davis. Would love a little bit more of thinking into the bike walk connection on S Street. I like the idea, creative, but how will folks not end up on the wrong side of the road since pedestrian crossings are on the other side?
All great questions and all things that we're going to be working through with that project as it gets developed. So with the nature of the timeline with that one's kind of driven by that project as it goes through design. So those will be questions that we will be asking them as they go through that process and making sure we're able to answer that. So making sure that whatever the exact location is, we'll be able to look through their plans and provide that feedback. So I don't have the answer at this exact time because it's going to be incorporated into how they design that site and how we work through public space permitting with them.
Paul's given.
And I do just, thank you. And I do just want to flag too, like the ANC also does have the ability when permits come through our permitting system to provide feedback as well. So that's one other layer on top of the feedback I'll provide.
Also going into the next question. Thanks for that, Paul. What is the annual budget funding that will be dedicated to maintain the planters once installed? And there's a couple follow-up questions for that. Who will the community members contact when they need the replanted or linter removed? Then as a follow-up, Jared said, planter maintenance should not be a volunteer solicited activity. Commissioner White said, the bid is your best partner as it mandates for that. And then Paul noted, love what the bid is doing here to improve and beautify the space. Ashley Templeton is awesome. Preston, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, those are exactly the questions we're working through and getting those answers. I don't have an answer to the budget. What we're working through is having we will have to have a maintenance group either with the bid or a civic association or a direct partner to work through those specific questions. And so that's something we are going to have to implement. It will be either through the bid or through a community group to be able to maintain those directly. We're working through those details, and we'll have to have a maintenance agreement with someone specific to do that. I've chatted with Christina lots of times. I know she's on the call, so those are questions we'll definitely work through together as well in other locations where we're looking at this.
Exactly. I believe this was addressed, but Monique Jupe asked, what are Jersey barriers? I know we're going to be using those throughout the project.
I think I addressed again that, and I just want to clarify, it was a solution we wanted to try to implement through the underpass. We're not proposing them anywhere else at this time. You've seen them potentially in like streeteries, for instance, in other in parts of the city. At the ends of them, you'll see them angled next to streeteries. And again, yeah, those are where you sometimes see on the side of a highway. They're kind of 6 foot by 2 foot concrete barriers that reinforce things.
Thank you. Julia, to everyone, Union Temple Church congestion is a challenge on Sundays, and the parking from the congregation results in a lot of illegal parking on 13th Street. They are concerned about no parking signs from MLK up to 13th, but I think this will really improve safety for residents, especially since they have 2 to 3 huge parking lots. Definitely worth a conversation with them. Okay, thank you for that comment. Paul, there's a lot of confusion between DPW and DDOT on this stretch of road. Can you clarify where the National Park Service ownership starts? I think it's kind of.
I think is that the underpass? I'm assuming probably when that came up in conversation. So I wish I had a really clear answer to that exact moment. We're working through it. I'm getting through some old maps related to that to see exactly where. As I understand it, it starts south of the actual underpass. So fully through the underpass, either right where the underpass starts or just after it, maybe somewhere near the railroad tracks. We're trying to make sure we understand exactly where, because again, exactly where makes a big difference. But through the underpass, in coordination with them, NPS does own the street and the sidewalk through there as we understand it now. We are coordinating with them actively and making sure that we can understand where that's at and what our options are in terms of addressing the problem through there.
Yes, and Christina Noel from the bid just noted that the bid is coordinating with DDOT and the National Park Service. Brent Peterson to the group, there are no parking zones at MLK and Marionberry Avenue in front of the Capital One. We need bollards. People are parked there all day and it jams up the buses making that turn. Couple ditto to Brent's comment, agree with Brent's comment. A lot of consensus there with that. Thank you. Preston, anything to add? Just agreement.
Yeah, and again, that's where it wouldn't be bollards per se. That's where we're looking at opportunities for planters potentially. So those are the exact conversations I've been having with the bid about where we can do that and leverage that again to address that problem, but try to make it a beautiful space at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And Jared also followed up to say restricted residential parking must be introduced as part of this plan. So we'll take that comment back. Julia, is there an active TSI for 14th and W or 14th and V?
I don't know the answer to that, but off the top of my head, but I can follow up. I know we do have a couple different DDOT folks on the calls. Can you flag those intersections again real quick?
It's for 14th and W and 14th and V.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I'll flag that. Again, broadly speaking, like we want to try to address like with those types of concerns within the context of this project. So if there were, for instance, we would try to address what those concerns are, what the potential solutions are into this concept again, so you can see it pieced together, not just have those TSIs in a vacuum where this study covers.
Paul Davis also just wanted to make sure to say this comment kind of addressed this a little bit about parking enforcement. Ensure that we're coordinating with DPW parking enforcement to get the same page about illegal parking. I've spoken with a lot of officers about how leadership prioritizes other parts of the district. Commissioner White, V Street is just too narrow for the bus. Thank you. Another note about parking from Jared Powell, just to note that churches contribute to the parking concerns, particularly on Sundays. Some more concerns about parking next to the church. So thank you, Julia, to everyone. I appreciate that the fire station is concerned about how their slowdown and response time. That is very valid. At the same time, a child was also hit by a speeding car at 14th and V in February. I don't think we can halt or ignore all traffic calming measures because there is a fire station at the corner. Some agreement with Julia on that comment. The fire station on C Street Southeast has speed humps. They're just basically noting other fire stations where they've used speed calming in the area. We've asked if 15th Street can be considered as a one-way during school hours, particularly around Ketchum Elementary School. DC Prep has closed and V Street does not need to be restricted anymore. I'm not sure about that. So I guess we can take a look at that. Excuse me 1 second as I scroll through a couple comments. Few things I didn't hear, and this is from Commissioner White. Morris Road traffic calming. Director Keschenbaum committed to 14th and 15th Street traffic calming measures as residents on those streets. Vehicles are being hit monthly and totaled. Didn't see any traffic calming measures for 16th Street. We asked about possibly another light on 16th Street. Okay. Any comments there for that?
Yeah, so traffic signals would not be a part of this project. It wouldn't be in the scope of what we're looking at here. That would come with like a corridor safety project, like the one that's gone east of here. So signals, it's with the exception of the one at V Street that we talked about, within the neighborhood is not something that we're looking at. Doesn't necessarily mean it can't be like a recommendation that we pass on, right? Like we have recommendations, as we alluded to earlier, where it may not be in the scope of what we can do at this project, but we can certainly clearly communicate those concerns, and for projects that could potentially implement them or look into them, that's something we can still do for sure. I do just want to emphasize, like, we're not showing every potential traffic calming treatment through here, or even it's not necessarily clear all the existing speed humps and so on. Where it's outlined in yellow here, which I think covers the streets that Commissioner White's referring to, would be on the table to have those discussions about, do circulation changes make sense to address safety issues? Do curb extensions and squeezing in the lanes and intersections to tighten it up, because we know that slows folks down. It is on the table where there's in yellow here. So let me know if that's not within this area, we can follow up.
And Preston, I will note in the Marionberry Avenue Corridor Safety Project, they are looking at a signal at 15th Street and Marionberry Avenue. Christine, they're doing signal warrant analysis right now.
Yep, I think they're working. I think it's that one and that project's still moving forward, and we'll be looking at those options. They're working through their final concept and design, I believe.
Okay, thank you for that. Another comment about the speeding. The reckless high-speed traffic on 11th Street Bridge, the traffic camera is a good idea. Would love to see hardened infrastructure as part of the solution to play a more active role in slowing vehicles and protecting people. It is well documented how tickets can stack up unpaid for our out-of-district friends. And that was from Paul Davis. And just going down to Commissioner White, as the majority of speeding or large portion of speeding isn't coming from registered DC tags, and Maryland and Virginia aren't forced to pay the camera tickets, what other options can be implemented that can slow down a majority of these perpetrators? Okay, thank you for that comment. Preston, did you have anything you wanted to add there, or just recording it?
Yeah, I noted, and we'll make sure we provide details in terms of like what the suite of tools are when we talk about traffic calming, what that means. Because again, my approach is always it's in all of the above. So it's context specific. It could be curb extensions like fair lawn. It could be planters and reinforcing no parking. So it is all of the above, and we'll make sure it's context specific. I do want to call out from the earlier project, there is also going to be a bus priority project along 11th Street. I believe it's from M Street just across the bridge in Navy Yard down and stopping to right at MLK and Marionberry where the other projects stopped. So some of these concerns will also be incorporated, right? The 11th Street ones, we're going to flag those recommendations for them to consider. Some of these safety concerns could potentially also be addressed through that project. So we absolutely will pass on these comments and make sure that's included in the engagement for that project.
Thank you, Preston. We got two more comments here. I'm going to just read off, and I'll defer back to you to see if anyone else any other feedback. Brent, submitting this question again, why is there zero enforcement of the start of the southbound bus lane in the evening? 2000 block is always has cars parked illegally, and I have never seen anyone get towed or even an officer reminding people of the restrictions. Paul Davis, Commissioner White's question is perfect. Signage is good. Paint on pavement is good. Cameras are good, but given the dynamic that Jamila identifies, ultimately we need infrastructure to protect the people. And then also coming back from Commissioner White, thanks DDOT for the update. I don't see 14th and 15th Street in the yellow.
Yeah, that's a great note for us. We'll make sure that this is clearly labeled, and especially when you're able to engage with the tool on any boards we have at the meeting. So 14th Street is there. That's the one right in the middle, just to the right, yep, of the historic Anacostia note. That's 14th, and then 15th just to the right between Marionberry and W Street is also included within that. So that's in our study area.
All right, and then I did see a couple comments just asking about the being muted during the meeting. We did reserve questions towards the end of the meeting. I know that Officer Trayon White, the MOCR, Miss Wendy Glenn, did you have a question that you wanted to ask at this time? Yes. Danica, do you mind unmuting Miss Glenn? All right, Miss Glenn.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. First of all, I think muting throughout an entire meeting is unconscionable because people have questions in the moment that they might not be able to stay for a 2-hour meeting to receive an answer for. My other thing is that I'm really concerned about the churches not being engaged. My concern is I hear when people say that Union Temple has a two large parking lots. Union Temple has a tremendously large congregation. Our churches were open and they stayed open all during the pandemic. for the residents in that community and all others who wanted to come. So now at this point, when we're talking about taking something away from them that they have had in their community for many, 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 many years, and I want to say decades, overnight, they came in to go to church, and overnight, there were no parking signs there. So that's a problem in communication. And I don't want it to be as it is uptown, where we're pitting churches against neighbors. So if we can figure out how to do this in a very, very inclusive way, then I think that will bode well for everyone. But I don't want to mute the voices of people who have been in these churches for 60 plus years. And it's a problem for me. I see it as something that is a potentially bigger problem. I think cultural competency is not really being looked at in the grand scheme of this. These churches have been here and they will continue to be here. So when we say that they have 2 large parking lots, they have a huge congregation, and they have a convocation that happens every year where folks come in from out of town, from Chicago. And this is something that has gone on with this church for well over 30 and 40 years. So we can figure some things out and not really dismiss folks because, you know, we're now looking at traffic calming. They are too. But again, they've never been a problem in our community, and I don't want them to be painted as if they are a problem in our community.
We're going to make plans to reach out to them to discuss these proposals so we can get their feedback.
Thanks, Gabe. I'm not sure if you all can hear him. Gabe, your volume is a little low. Gabe said he was going to reach out and talk to them about next steps.
Yeah, we will reach out to the church.
All right. Does anyone else have any more comments or questions they would like to share? If you would like to ask a question and be unmuted, just please raise your hand or enter your comment into the chat. Mr. Powell's hand is raised.
Very much for this, setting a time aside this evening to actually present this. We really do appreciate it. My name is Jared Powell. I serve on the HABA board, as well as Julia, who's also on this meeting. One of the things I did notice was you mentioned like the big ideas for Fairlawn, but I didn't see those equally represented for historic Anacostia, including curb extensions. Can you speak to that? And then the second question I did have was there at Frederick Douglass House, there is frequent bus idling directly outside. What is the traffic considerations to address that as well?
Yeah, so it's the same suite of options in terms of traffic calming options and like the designs of the Anacostia. It's more so that we have these competing options that we're looking at to how to best address those. But the same, once we decide on a path forward collectively, those tools are the same ones. Like 13th and W, for instance, that is effectively like a painted curb extension to get rid of the dual left turn and have the stop sign. So it's still that same approach. It's more so we just have a bigger conversation to have in terms of the approach we take there. But again, once we decide on approach, the specific tools and parts of those plans will be the same pieces, for instance, that we're looking at in Fairlawn. Just the focus here is we've really got to, through historic Anacostia, decide on the path forward of how to address those kind of 5 main issues here that we've talked about. So it would be the same one. We can try to, again, be more clear about the specific tools and pieces that will be a part of that.
That's great. And then the curb extensions, et cetera, does that account for the green infrastructure such as bioretention planters as part of those curb extensions that we see in Ward 6 and 3 and 1?
So it can. It depends on like the immediate, like how fast we want to do it. It depends on where the inlets are. So it's kind of we're focused here really. This project when it initially started was more of that planning project, and we, based on the feedback, want to move forward with some faster implemented stuff. So it may mean the first go at it is the painted approach. It may be the more tactical style, if you will, to start, but that sets us up for the future, like on Marionberry Avenue, for instance, where we've got the corridor safety project taking more of that approach. It sets us up for the long term to have opportunities for green infrastructure in the future because we've started to lay out where it could potentially go. So that's what I would say in terms of what we're focused on here is we don't want perfect to be the enemy of good. We want to get some progress here, and that could hopefully set the stage in the future for those types of opportunities.
I think that sounds great. I do think that there should be a written commitment, though, when you do make to the community. So if this is going to be a phased approach, there should be a written commitment to the community that says within this specific time period that we're going to expand and meet these infrastructures that are already in place in other wards. So I think that's very important.
Thank you so much for your comments.
Oh, no, there's still a second comment. The second comment was about the bus idling. So currently there is W Street in front of the Frederick Douglass House. It is a two-way traffic street, as we know, but there's one side of it that says no bus idling, but there's bus idling all the time and visitors parking there, which further contributes to the egress of vehicles. So can you speak to what is the plan for that stretch between 14th and 15th Street on W for buses, specifically motor coaches?
I can't personally speak to that immediately. I will flag, we do have Keith Jones with community engagement on this call. We do have some bus folks. Again, we can note these and follow up as items, but I don't have an immediate answer as part of this because it's not directly part of this study. So I'm not sure if either of those folks has an answer, but we will note that and see if we can chase that and try to get you an answer.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you all. I don't have an answer for that at the moment. I will reach out to the Department of Public Works, DPW, regarding enforcement. I know that was a question regarding as well, the bus lanes on MLK. So I've reached out to DPW in the past, and so I'll do it again and try to get some enforcement over there. But I also encourage you to call 311 and call and see if we can get an officer over there to take care of that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And Jared, is that Mr. Jared Powell? Is that any other questions or comments? All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. I will do another look in the chat to see if we have any more comments or questions from the CAG. We appreciate you all joining us this evening and your feedback, which we have collected and we will review as a team. Again, just want to also note for those that have joined later, we are tentatively planning a public meeting for September 7th. So if you foresee any events or activities that we should be aware of, please let me know immediately so we can make sure that we get maximized attendance for the residents and constituents that you all serve. All right. I don't see any hand raises.
Patrice,
Yes,
Commissioner
sir.
White has a question.
Yes. Okay.
Hey everyone, thank you so much. This was a really good meeting. My question is a bigger overall one. I've been asking it for a couple of years, but just want to understand where DDOT is, or if it's even a part of the conversation on how do we divert or reduce commuter traffic, realizing that this is great what we're doing, but this is also kind of not getting to one of the root causes of the issues in our community, which is stemming from two entrances off of Suitland Parkway. Well, two entrances, yeah, almost three entrances coming into Anacostia, where people are trying to get to the other side of the city to get to wherever they're going. And this is really wonderful. I think these are going to make, a lot of improvements, and we're still going to have the root issue of Suitland Parkway, especially because that side of PG County is rapidly developing as well. And there are thousands of more residents that are going to be our neighbors in PG County along Branch Avenue, all the way up to Pennsylvania Avenue. They're, redeveloping that whole part of PG. And so I would like to know kind of what is the bigger conversation and thinking around addressing the root issue of how to get some of this commuter traffic coming from the parkway, coming from 295 out of the smaller communities.
Thank you, Commissioner White. I remember you making those comments in the past, and I think it's a really important thing to raise about the higher level issues. I do think potentially, again, one of the other hats I wear is also within planning the Ward 7 and 8 planner. So those are the kind of perfect higher level questions I'm always thinking about before I go to bed at night, honestly, of how to fix those sorts of things and think about the bigger ones. I can flag that with the 295 project related to this on that map that showed all the overlapping projects. That is a really big picture, long-term project that's asking those types of questions. I'll have to double check the study area in terms of like, does it capture maybe that the edge of Suitland Parkway that you're talking about? I'll flag it. But yeah, what you're presenting is that's a really long-term, big idea thing, and I'll follow up and get a good understanding if that project's looking at that and make sure that they know this community is thinking about that and very concerned about that.
All righty, thank you so much for that. Do we have any other questions or comments in the chat? Any other hand raises? All right. Well, this was a great meeting. I appreciate everyone for joining. Thank you so much for your feedback. If you have any other questions or comments, feel free to share them with the team. And again, if you are aware of any activities that are taking place on Saturday, September 7th, where we should not host this public meeting, please let me know and let our team know. All right, well, that will conclude tonight's meeting. You all enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.